All right. So, welcome to What a Word is Worth, a space for creative minds to speak about viable ways to heal the world through writing and other inventive mediums. This is your host, Marianela Medrano. I am the founder of Palabra Center, where words are given as medicine. And my guest today is Ken Frazier. I just killed his name, but he'll forgive me. A person I admired and love a great deal. Kent is a father and co-parent of two young children and a seasoned and former HR executive, catalyst and steward of conscious capitalism. He is a performing musician, athlete, and transformational integral coach. And I can't be any happier. Welcome, Kate.
Oh, thank you, Marianela. It's an honor to be here with you. I've so enjoyed our friendship blossoming and blooming over the years of knowing you through all the twists and turns of life. So, yeah, you've been a great listening partner, friend. So I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And so many things that we're not gonna go into right now. But Ken, do you often talk about sensitivity and vulnerability, and you present them almost as containers for our strength, for finding our footage. And that makes me think of Buddha talking to his musician friend who played the sitar for Buddha and his community. And in one of the concerts, when the concert ended, they spoke about the spiritual path. And Buddha asked the musician, what are the consequences when the string is too tight or when it's too loose? And the musician replied, well, when the string is too loose, it cannot be played. When it is too tight, it breaks easily. Buddha used that conversation to emphasize that spiritual growth and evolution is much like playing a string instrument, like playing the sitar. It should be not too loose or too tight. As a musician and writer and creator, how has this principle informed your existence, your being in the world?
What a beautiful question. You certainly know how to speak into and pluck my heartstrings by bringing a musical question forward. So thank you so much. What comes to mind first as this idea of too loose or too tight is actually the lyric of a song by one of my favorite artists, a gentleman named Amos Lee. And he has a song called Keep It Loose, Keep It Tight. And it's one of my favorite songs, you know, speaking to that very idea. And much like my understanding of the Buddhist way, this idea of practice, well, at least in my experience of it, so what am I practicing? Many times I'm practicing finding that middle path, finding that middle way where I'm not too tight or I'm not too loose. Another way I can say that, and this is language that I got from exploring myself through the lens of the gene keys. If you're familiar with that particular lens, it's built from human design and the I Ching and a number of other, some astrology, I think, that speaks to that, holding that tension between controlling and yielding.
That makes so much
If I'm
sense.
too tight, I'm too
Right.
controlling, I'm gripping too hard, I'm too attached,
Mhm,
I'm
mhm,
more likely to break.
mhm.
I'm not flexible.
Yeah.
If I'm too yielding, maybe I'm apathetic, or I can't hold my form.
Mhm, mhm.
So as you were saying in your question, it's not playable. If we need
Right.
some tension,
Yeah.
to hold the integrity of our shape, but too loose, we fall apart, too tight, we break.
Mhm.
So wherever we might be in a relationship, be it with ourselves, another person, some things that are happening in our lives, I use this idea of, well, where am I? Am I gripping too tightly? Am I
Mhm.
controlling too much? Am I pushing too hard, too much effort? Or am I, not paying attention, not engaged? Where am I? And how do I find that middle C? If we want to put it back in the musical,
Yeah.
how do I find that tuning? So
Yeah, and especially in creativity, right? Because if we are too tight, we then fall into the realm of psychological inflexibility.
yeah,
And it's very difficult to produce from there. And I mean, you're bringing relationships is the same thing, right? If we are too rigid in the way we approach or too loose, then there is no harmony in
yeah.
the exchange. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
just being aware of, and as humans, we drift all the time. We
Mm-hmm.
drift, between various polarities. This one
Yeah.
we're talking about
Yeah.
in particular is one that many of us are familiar with. So also inherent in this practice for me, and I suspect for you, just in my knowing of you, is when I notice I have veered from my middle view, my middle path, and I'm either too loose or too tight.
Mm-hmm.
Let me exercise some self-compassion
That's the key.
and not crank on myself a little bit more as
Mm-hmm.
I'm approaching one or the other polarity, and
Mm-hmm.
gently compassionately bring myself back towards center.
Yeah. That is so key, so important to have the presence, right, of compassionately holding ourselves in those moments. But boy, isn't it hard?
I was going to say, you don't know anything about that. I don't know anything about that. Some of the conversations we've shared privately, we're each on
Yeah.
that edge, from time to
Yes.
time. And
Yes.
again, that's part of the
Absolutely.
human condition.
Mm-hmm.
If we're all in, if we're continuously trying to become more aware of our ways of relating to what's happening,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
and the stories we're
Yeah.
telling ourselves and
Yeah.
everybody else about
That's
what
it.
is or isn't happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What's the nature and the quality of that story that I'm telling?
Yeah. I mean, as it's so important what you're saying, because that is the idea behind the podcast and the what a word is worth, which I inherited from our common friend in one of his poems, Reggie Mara. But it's this idea that words carry a lot of weight and power, both healing and destructive power, right? And this is bringing me to I think it's texture of the same question still, but we are living in a world that is has self-inflicted ecological disasters that are threatening us. And the ecological disasters are not just pertaining to what's happening in the exterior, but also what's happening in the inside.
Mm.
The list of endangered species grows in tandem with our greed and
Mm.
our
Mm.
tendency to want more and more, and that dissatisfaction that is actually leading us to destroy the earth. And, you know, the many personal and collective tragedies. You know, I was facilitating a meditation this morning, and I usually I don't hear the news, but when I'm going to facilitate a meditation, I do like to know what's happening in the world and kind of bring that to our awareness. And I mean, the number of disasters that are connected to greed and our mistreatment of Earth are really scary, I will say. So we have climate crisis, societal injustices, the aftermath of the pandemic. We're still kind of vibrating under the impact, especially us people of color. But how these issues informed your Fully Human at Work offerings? And I really want Fully Human at Work is an initiative that I admired and support 100%. So I want us to talk more, or for the audience to know about Fully Human at Work, and if it is informed by an urgency, perhaps, to examine the way that we are self-inflicting harm at many levels. And maybe also you want to talk about the work you're doing in 12 degrees, but I leave it up to you.
Yeah.
I know I'm choking up a lot here.
No, thank you. I appreciate the space you've created to speak into. So you noted this, you started putting the context of the ecological crisis that, you know, many believe has been accelerated or accentuated or even brought on by human activities over the last few hundred years. So this perspective for me has been growing for some time as I became increasingly aware of these things. You know, probably, well, I can go back to even my first job actually out of college. I studied biology and psychology in college, you know, just fascinated with who we are as human beings, biologically, psychologically, how we make meaning and how we move through the world. And I saw early on in my career, as you were pointing to, this idea of greed driving most people and most agendas. And as a young man coming out of college, that's what I was you know, we explore in Fully Human at Work, as you know, this idea of cultural givens. What was I given? And we're all given these things from our families and cultures of origin. We get stories, we get language, we get actually, you know, it's like code. Here's what's good, here's what's bad, here's what we believe, here's what we don't, here's who we like, here's who we don't. We all get this stuff. And I've always just loved people. And so when I had the opportunity to, early in my career, to help people bring their ideas forward, to help people find jobs that they love, to help people grow companies, I would increasingly become disenfranchised by the preoccupation of money at the expense of everyone and everything else. And the externalizing of things to the environment, like you're speaking of now. I think it's quite fascinating, the lawsuits that are coming from states against big oil around climate crimes. You know, much like war crimes against humanity. I mean, it's like, so these energetic entities, economic entities that had knowledge of the harm that was being done, and chose otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay, so how are we going to deal with that? I love your referencing the internal and the external. So the UN stated, years ago, here's 17 sustainable development goals in the exterior. Here's 17 things that we all, as a global, interdependent global community, need to focus on in order to create a viable future that doesn't continue to accelerate the sixth mass extinction, which is well underway.
Yeah.
And we sit around wondering why we haven't made progress on many of those goals. Well, one of the organizations that I've been part of, and the founders of this organization inform much of the work that we do at Fully Human. It's Peter Senge and Robert Keegan and Otto Scharmer, and all these folks that have been studying adult development over the last 50 years, so that we now have a map and a trajectory of how we continue to grow and make meaning in what we value. And so as we look at the exterior and wonder why we haven't made any progress, what Interdevelopment Goals is, this global nonprofit open source community of human practitioners. We need to grow up. It's an interdevelopmental opportunity. And this isn't new news. Einstein spoke about this back in the day. You can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. So here's where it gets a little tricky. And this is where it gets a little sticky. And some might even say, crosses some thresholds. But it's like this idea that capitalism is in many ways the culprit of this current meta crisis that we're in, because of its preoccupation with asymmetrically accumulating a thing that's fake and has no intrinsic value, while depleting all the things that actually support the living systems of the planet. That's pathological. And so you mentioned conscious capitalism. It was a great cause that I enjoyed 10 years ago, working with the founder, John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods, and some of his friends. It's like, how might we take this system of human cooperation that we label capitalism, that's one of the most powerful systems of human cooperation that's ever been conceived and enacted. Well, how might we reorganize that to elevate humanity? And that's the question that I've been living into for the last 10 years, only coming to recognize that anything that, like, it's named capitalism. So we're praying to capital as the God. That's not going to solve our current crisis. It can't, because it's the essence and the origin of the crisis. So it's not going to solve our current situation.
It is the contradiction, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So a quote I saw recently, I wish I could remember I'll look it up here maybe in a second. I saw a quote that said, it's almost easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. So all of these perspectives have been
entrenched, right?
Yeah, it's so entrenched, right? So all of this has been informing Fully Human and my work over the last 30 years, really, but the last 10 years, it's intensified after going through the Integral Coaching Canada program and much more deeply understanding human development through my own experiences, and having worked with many people on multiple continents over the last 10 years. What occurred to me, that I'll try to tie this up together, is I reached a point in time, as a new father, and my marriage was unraveling, and I was faced, we're talking about sitting at the edge of darkness, or not, wondering what to do. And so I found myself at, approaching 50 years old, getting divorced for a second time with a 1 and 3-year-old, and wondering how I'm going to take care of myself and my kids, because I can't bring my soul or any part of myself to continue to be an agent in this system that I believe is killing the future for my kids.
Mhm.
And so, it's become a really challenging, life experience for me. It's like, how does one become viable in a system that we're all swimming in if
Mhm.
I don't believe in the water I'm swimming in anymore?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't believe it's in the best interest of my kids' future,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
and their, and the generations that follow.
Mhm.
Um, and so I had suicidal depression. Like I couldn't
Mhm.
make meaning. I couldn't make,
Yeah.
I mean, you were
Yeah.
really helpful with
Right.
me working through these seasons. And so where you mentioned Reggie and I created this program, Fully Human at Work, and we named it purposefully and quite intentionally an evolutionary imperative.
Mhm. Mhm.
If we don't develop and we
Mhm.
bring this developmental lens purposefully forward to
Mhm.
help with the judgment and the criticism and the making wrong, because that's not helpful.
No. And so is Fully Human at Work encouraging primarily not only, but an attention to the individual development in order for us to then contribute to the collective
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah,
transformation?
yes.
Mhm.
So, in an include and transcend
Mhm.
model,
Right,
we
right.
we start with the individual. How am
Mhm.
I seeing thing? And we designed the program with the architecture of the Eightfold Path,
Right.
holding this inquiry for people.
Mhm.
We don't have the answer. I'm not going to
Right.
tell you or anyone else who you have to be or what you should or shouldn't do. You and everyone else who comes through our program knows that for
Mhm.
themselves, or they're here to figure that out.
Mhm.
So we use that Eightfold Path as an invitation for individuals to look at what we've named these enduring commitments that most adults have. What's
Mhm.
my ongoing commitment to myself and my own authenticity, who I most want to be and become in the world, distinct from what I got from my parents and culture
Mhm.
and family and friends and teach all this stuff. That as we've been playing with this, is to what extent do I know my authentic self, is one of the questions
Mhm.
we ask, distinct from all my cultural and familial givens. Because in many ways, when we're growing up, we adapt to be accepted by our family and culture of origin.
Yeah.
So a little kid who wants to act a certain way authentically gets told, no, you
Mhm.
can't do that. And they start shutting down parts of their authentic self in order to be accepted by mom and dad and get,
Mhm.
all their good boys and good girls and pats on that. This happens. But over decades, we have all these adaptations to belong to a new company, to a new person we're dating, to it, whatever. We lose sight of who we actually are. So people come to this program to actually begin to untangle. Oh gosh, I'm so far away from the person I was born to be before
Mhm.
all the cultural and environmental stressors came that had me start adapting to survive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as people
Yeah.
do that, they start to understand, oh gosh, why am I in this job? Why did
Mhm.
I choose this relationship? Why did I choose this vocation? What's my relationship with money? What's my relationship with the planet? What's my relationship with all these things? My relationship to self, my relationship to my family, my relationship to my community, my relationship to my work, how I take care of myself and my family and contribute to my community. How awake, aware, alive am I in those 4 elements of my life and those 6 interdependencies, right? We can form a tetrahedron. And we
Mhm.
did this intentionally.
Yeah.
This is where
Yeah.
12 degrees is coming from.
Mhm.
We want to program the wisdom of nature into our structures. So
Exactly.
the most stable structure in existence is the tetrahedron.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so 4 elements, 6 relationships: self, home,
Mhm.
work, community.
Mhm.
What's my wake?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. See, so many things, because I'm thinking, you know, what this proposal of examining the cultural givens, what that, the way I see it, is a segue into understanding the psychology of parts, because each one of those givens becomes a part.
That's right.
You know, the truncated artist or
That's right.
curious child is a part
Right.
that then obscures or covers up the authentic self.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's why I so much believe in what you are doing through Fully Human at Work as an authentic platform to help people explore ways to create true transformation, starting from the self after we find it,
Mhm.
and then expanding to the collective. Um, how can you say a little bit more about the degrees
Yeah,
and
12
you
degrees.
know
Yeah,
what the
I'm
12
happy to.
degrees and the offerings
Yeah,
that
this is,
you're
thank you.
extending?
This is unfolding, and it has a lot of energy and excitement for me. So as you know, we just wrapped up a 3.5 year large
Mhm.
coaching project with Amazon Web Services. And during that time, COVID happened, a lot of social unrest happened. Myself and everyone I was coaching were trying to deal with being at home, working through a computer, having, kids running around, having siblings that were taken care of around, or parents that were taken care of around, right? And all of a sudden it's like super intense. And so as our business was growing because of the demand of the overwhelm and the people's challenges holding all of that stress, I wasn't immune to any of that at all. And while I felt super competent and capable working with executives in my coaching practice, I noticed I was becoming more and more at the effect of my kids, or at the effect of myself and my way of relating to my kids, who were just being, age appropriate kids.
Right.
But it was like I was really activated and charged. So I hired a parent coach, this woman, Connie Miller, who's my partner in 12 Degrees. Turns out we went to the same university. We're from similar parts of the United States. And so right away, there was a familiarity with just demeanor, willing to do work, be athletic, look at stuff. And so she was incredibly helpful for me in developing a new way of relating to myself as a single dad, a new way of relating to my kids, a new way of relating to the job of parenting and solo parenting. And as we were in our work together, and as I was in this work with AWS at the same time, Connie and I had this realization. I heard all the time from the people at AWS, thank you so much. The work that we're doing here, I got to tell you, is helping me as much, if not more, at home with my partner and my kids as it does with my clients and my teammates. So, thank you so much. Connie coaches as parents, busy executives, right? And all the busy executives, top performing executives that she's coaching in the context of their parenting say, Connie, thank you so much. All these lessons and muscles that we're developing here in the context of my parenting are helping me with my boss and my teammates and my customers. So what we had this realization that whether we're at home or we're at work, these inner muscles that we were talking about earlier, the inner development that's necessary for human beings in this day and age to continue to adapt and evolve, to navigate the accelerating change and hard things that are coming. This is an evolutionary imperative. And so it doesn't
Absolutely.
matter if we're at work exercising these muscles or at home exercising these muscles. How do we learn how to regulate our nervous systems? How do we learn emotional agility? How do we learn how to listen? How do
Mhm.
we learn how to have fight constructively and then have, good repair? How do
Yes.
we learn forgiveness?
Mhm.
All these things that,
Mhm.
are some of the harder earned parts of our character, parts of being a human being
Mhm.
fully. And so this new expression is really honing in on a particular person in a particular life stage.
Yeah.
It's one that I'm in, so I know it most.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
know it really well. I'm an entrepreneur. I work with
Yeah.
top performing
Mhm.
executives that have little kids and that have aging parents.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so,
So
as
you see the full
see
spectrum.
the
Yes.
whole thing, right?
Mhm.
And wherever we are along that continuum, whether we're the kids or young adults leaving the nest for the first time,
Mhm.
or getting newly married, or becoming parents for the first time, or becoming
Mhm.
parents for a second or third time, heaven forbid losing a child,
Mhm.
or a child that's transitioning in their identity,
Yeah.
or your parents that you're also caregiving, or a sibling that you're
Mhm.
right. It's
Mhm.
intense.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard being a human being right now.
It's a lot of suffering and a lot of, going back to this idea of self-inflicted, though suffering. So the way I see your work, and, one of the things that I commented to you is that in your website, what I hear is you're a bodhisattva. You have taken bodhisattva vows to alleviate or decrease unnecessary suffering. So this is the unnecessary suffering that we find ourselves, all the things that you were detailing, empty out into unnecessary suffering. And I'm so glad that you have taken the Eightfold Path as the guidance,
Mm.
right, to help individuals see. When you look back to the last 5 years, how that bodhisattva vow that you took in the context of what you're saying, has it changed? Has it
Mm. Mm.
transformed in
Mm.
some way?
Mm.
Because of what you're saying, you have lived through some of these things firsthand
Mhm.
in your own experience, and also witnessing, holding space for people. Has that had a transformative impact on your bodhisattva vow?
Yeah, very
And yours?
much.
Mhm.
It hadn't for quite some time, and then
Mhm.
again, this recent expression that's now seemingly really wanting powerfully to unfold 12 degrees in our initial conversations with folks. There's a lot of interest,
Mhm.
and what's shifting subtly, yet as sometimes the more subtle the shifts, the more profound
Impactful.
the impact. And so what has occurred to me in the last 3 to 6 months, I would say,
Mhm.
as we were completing this work with AWS,
Mhm.
and I was noticing where, the way I was relating to my kids, and just
Mhm.
the way I'm holding my life's work at this season in my life. I noticed craving. I was craving. Why aren't these big companies continuing? Why aren't we growing? Why aren't they continuing to invest in people? We've gotten so much beautiful feedback. People want to do this work more, but there's something in the corporation way that, there wasn't an appetite to continue. So I
Mhm.
noticed myself complaining, and I noticed myself blaming, and I noticed myself attacking, and I noticed all that unnecessary suffering that I was creating for myself, towards this thing that I had gripped so tightly for the last
Yeah.
handful of years, because that's how I was taking care of myself and my kids, and many of my friends and colleagues,
Mhm.
you know, were
We're
supporting
dependent,
lots of
right.
people through really hard things.
Mhm.
And I was attached to that. My sense of self was attached to
Mhm.
that. My ego came back, right? So I got to let that thing die. And so in the letting of that die, and my egoic attachment to being someone who can influence large corporations to
Mhm.
evolve and develop, okay, that's a big ego project. You know, let's let that die. And I was railing and raging and ranting,
Mhm.
hissing and spitting and futzing
Mhm.
and fidgeting, as you might remember from one of my poems. And so then I was like, okay, I've been here before. I've let go of my identity before. Where's the gift?
Mhm. Mhm.
How is this happening for me? If I just look what's right in front of my eyes, oh, my kids are right in front of my eyes. My first job is being a great dad. Because in those enduring commitments, what's evolving in my bodhisattva vow is, it's not so much going out there that I have to go be a warrior in. My warriorship and my hardest battles are with myself and my way of relating to my kids as a single dad. That's my work.
Yeah.
So this pivot that's
Mhm.
that's occurring in this bodhisattva vow is from trying to convince corporations that they need to care about people more than money, because they're not
Yeah.
gonna. It's
Yeah.
in their naming. We care about capital more than money.
Mhm.
Great. Got it. I care about kids. I
Mhm.
care about families,
Mhm.
because healthy family units allow those children to be more healthily developed, and then they go out in the world and have healthier relationships, healthier schools, healthier communities, healthier workplaces. So I would much rather serve
Mhm.
and translate this hard-earned wisdom that I've earned over 54 years into the young hearts and minds, where it has a much longer runway to continue to develop, rather than trying to convince 50-something-year-olds that they should actually look and unwrap and unwind.
Mhm.
It's just a different conversation that I'm more interested. You know, I'm still happy to help 50, 40, 30 something, whatever. But I've noticed in as I let all that stink come up, okay, well, what smells good, and where's my energy feeling good? And it's deeply around my kids
Yeah.
and families.
Mhm.
It's the same work. It's just in a different context. And so the other shift is, so much of our work over the last 5 years has been done virtually.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's made me sick.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm so thankful that I was able to take care of myself and my family,
Right.
making a living, coaching people through Zoom. I miss being out in my
Mhm.
community face to face with folks. So these last couple weeks, where I've been sitting in a coffee shop, having impromptu conversations, getting to know, the owners and the managers of these various businesses that I frequent all the time. Now I'm building relationships in my community. I'm on the school board with the PTA board at my school. We're building community events together, and I'm so much more deeply satiated
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
in
So beautiful.
this what feels like a much more ripe and receptive field
Mhm.
to plant and
Mhm.
nurture seeds of evolutionary
Mhm.
importance, versus trying to put them in soil that doesn't want them.
This is so important because it's all, I mean, it's resting on a relational principle, right? And this idea of building communities from the bottom up is an old one, it's an ancient wisdom that we have forgotten. So it is beautiful how you are reconnecting with that, and really what I hear is the leaning on reciprocity. And also, I'm imagining in your work with the 12 degrees, there is also the working with the parents or the caregivers to unlearn certain learnings or cultural givings that
Yeah.
we don't necessarily have to carry around with us. But it's also beautiful how you are describing, right, how darkness can be this teacher that can generate the transformation we need. I mean, we don't want to hear it when we are there standing at the edge, as John Halifax invites us to do. We don't want to hear it, but that is when the true transformation, right, emerges.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Do you have a question, or do you want me to?
Yeah, what has darkened taught you? What has
Yeah. Beautiful.
standing at the edge
So for
taught you?
many years in my life, adaptive strategies, I wasn't allowed, I told myself that I wasn't allowed to feel bad.
Yeah.
I always had to be the happy, enthusiastic,
Right.
entertain people, make sure everyone's having a good time. There's no room or space for bad feelings. So the last 10, 15 years, I've been letting all those bad feelings just,
emerge and be. Yeah.
And what I've learned, from sitting with rage, from sitting with anger and fear and shame and all those nasty regret, guilt, sitting in all that stink.
Yeah.
There's a couple things that I've noticed. One is just acknowledging and admitting that it's there, and then that move of self-compassion and forgiveness. I was listening to Richard Rohr's Falling Upward again for like the fifth time today, and he's speaking about all these saints. Saint Francis did a lot of partying. Saint Magdalene did a lot of loving. Saint so-and-so did a lot of killing. Saint so-and-so did, right? It's like every saint has a sinner in them, and every sinner has a saint in them. So it's coming to terms with that part of being fully human, that I've fucked up and I've made mistakes and I'm not all perfect and pretty. Okay, great. No one is. So if I can relax in that way. The other thing that I've learned is, particularly around rage and anger, is that sitting in there long enough, and then once I can get to the question of, well, what am I so angry about? And in this last experience, I was angry about what's happening in the environment and the future for my kids. And so anger points to things that we deeply care about, always, and a boundary that's been crossed, or something, a value, a belief, something I hold as sacred has been compromised in some way. So let me get reoriented around to what I'm committed to, rather than raging against the thing okay, great. I'm going to get in creator mode and create as powerfully as I can on behalf of my kids' future. That means I'm going to get involved in the school board. That means I'm going to work with parents. That means I'm going to shift where I place my attention, energy, effort, work, words. And as I'm doing this, one of Connie's friends, who she works with as a parent, guess what? She works at Google. She's like, oh, this would be great at Google. Right? Oh, you all just did it at Amazon? Great. Come do a version of it here.
Wonderful.
So it's just finding the people that honor and know and respect the human condition, and how we can better care and steward that.
And easing in that process, because do you subscribe to this idea that if we stay in the constriction, not to stay forever, but to feel the confinement of the constriction, we can pivot into expansiveness?
That's right.
I think that's what I hear you.
Oh, very much so. So I love this idea of, how does constriction, or how does that actually promote or breed creativity? And this, we can take it back into the art form of songwriting. When I've had absolute pleasure to work with Peter Himmelman, who's a Grammy and Emmy nominated musician. I was in a songwriting workshop with him at one point in time, and he's like, okay, set your iPhone timer for 5 minutes. And you just write for 5 minutes on whatever the song title. And I was like, oh my God, there's no way. He goes, okay, just write it, and whatever you have, bring it into the studio tonight. And I was like, shit, what do I want? 5 minutes. And the song came out like, I just let it flow. What do I want to say? Where's the rhyme? Right. And I just got into the art form of poetry or language. And I let that inform what wanted to happen of its own volition. Like, what's that one poem? Like, poetry found itself. You probably know this poem better than I do. I forget. I don't know. I'm gonna butcher it, but it's yeah, I lost my train of thought.
Well, this idea that we can understand that we are in a constricted moment, see the elements, and then moving into the expansiveness of the knowing.
It brings clarity, right? It's like, what? Okay, I have 5 minutes. 5 minutes. What do I actually have to say?
Exactly. Beautiful, beautiful. Is there anything I have not asked that you want our audience to know about your work, about you, and this beautiful journey with its ups and downs and very narrow, curvy paths that you have taken?
Well, I don't know if there's a quote that's showing up for me, and I'm also trying to figure out remember who said it, but it's something like every adventure has secret destinations of which the traveler is unaware.
Totally.
I forget. Do you remember who said that?
I don't, but it resonates with me in the sense that, yes, I mean, it connects to that idea, Buddhist idea of everything, that we have no control, and that everything is forever shifting and dying, right?
Well,
and
so
that
now,
we don't know.
So now you're bringing up, and we're probably out of time, but maybe for another conversation is back to where we started at the beginning of the song. So we're in our coda. Too tight, too loose.
Yes.
Yielding and controlling.
Yeah.
This idea of wu wei, not forcing things. And so one of the things I've been playing with, I can call the tension patience and persistence.
Yes.
That's right. It. That dance.
Held lightly,
right? So committed on attachment, committed on attachment. I am fully committed. Yeah. And so this is, I'm fully committed to serving the infinite game. What do I mean by that? I mean, I'm going to work on behalf of the next 7 generations, because what I do now matter. We've been gifted, all the ancestors got us to here. Right. And now we're in this stage where it's our time to steward what we're handing off. And are we living in that deep time? And are we thinking about who came before us and the obligations of stewardship that we have to carry the torch of life? Or are we too busy chasing next quarter's earnings or the next bigger toy or the next bigger trophy or the next, whatever the more thing is. So one of my challenges is this: I can't stop that from happening. I can't stop climate change. I can't stop I'm not going to solve.
You can't stop impermanence from being.
I can't stop
the
entropy,
ultimate.
right? It's like, it's like, I'm never going to stop entropy. And so the last thing I'll say that ties into this shift in the Bodhisattva vow is, okay, if we're just in that part of the waveform and we're in an entropic waveform and we are in the 6th mass extinction and climate change is going to continue to accelerate and Okay, great. How do I want to actually love that? And who do I want to spend time with? Oh, it's my kids and their friends and young people. I don't need to convince people in power to be any different, because they're not going to be. I would rather, if we're all going down in the next, however long, because we all go down anyway eventually, right? And so
that's the ultimate truth.
that's the ultimate truth. So if we're all, ashes, we all fall down. Who do I want to be in that falling down?
That's it. Who do you want to show up as? Yes.
And
That's
how
beautiful.
deeply do I want to care
Mhm.
and risk my heart in those ways?
That is beautiful. Thank you. That is a beautiful way to close our conversation. But I truly hope we will have a second edition of this conversation, because I feel there are so many angles that I wanted to go more deeper into, but we're constricted by this
We're
illusion of
constricted.
time.
Yes,
And
I would welcome that opportunity to
yeah,
continue the conversation anytime, my friend. Thank you for having me.
beautiful. Thank you for being the beautiful person you are.
Love you.
So thank you for listening to What a Word is Worth. You can access today's interview at Anchor and other podcast apps. And if you're interested, hit the subscribe button. And also, if you found this program beneficial, leave us a review. I am with you in love and compassion, always, always, always.